Welcome to the Private Equity Value Creation Podcast, where we interview leading investors, operators, bankers, and advisors to help you answer one question: how do we increase the enterprise value of our companies? My name is Shiv Narayanan, and each episode I will dive deep with a guest to help you become a better value creator and capital allocator. So with that said, let's jump right in and let's get started with today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. It's a different type of interview today. I've actually asked Farhad, Taylor, and Tatiana from our client services team to be guests on the podcast. And the reason I asked them on is they're the ones that are regularly working with all of our private equity partners and hundreds of clients across all the different B2B companies that we work with. And the reason I wanted to do this episode is that you often hear from me when I'm talking about the challenges companies face, the problems that they're actually encountering, and how we help solve them, or how companies in general should approach problems like that. But we've never really had our client services team come in and talk about their wisdom and expertise when they're really on the front lines and engaging with these clients and seeing their data firsthand and talking to their teams and transforming the organizations, or even reporting up to the private equity investors or their boards to actually make a lot of those changes. And there's a lot of wisdom that they have or have access to that sometimes even I can't bring to these calls sometimes because I'm not in the client services side of our company. So I wanted to have them on and go into a deep dive into the types of engagements that we do, the insights that come back from there, and how you as the listener, when you're thinking about your specific company or an investment that you've made or a portfolio company where you think that marketing can be a huge lever, how to really think about that to scale that business faster. And there's just a ton of wisdom on the call. Tatiana is a content and SEO expert, and she's helped hundreds of our client companies scale up their organic traffic. And she's done a lot of breakthrough work on the AI side more recently as companies are more concerned about that and seeing declines in their organic search volumes. Taylor is a product marketing and sales enablement and comms expert. And she's done a ton of work with our clients on helping them position themselves better, build messaging and messaging frameworks to be out there and build a more thought leadership authority in a particular marketplace. And Farhad is our resident CMO, and he's the one that is working with the boards and the CEOs and the investors to really craft the marketing strategy, figure out the budgets, figure out the team structures with the clients that we're working with. So all three of them have done this hundreds of times over, and there's just a ton of wisdom that they bring to this episode. So I'm looking forward to you hearing from them and hearing what they have to share, and also thinking about how you can apply it to your business, and also seeing more of the inside work of To SaaS and seeing if maybe it could be a fit for the companies that you're actually working on. So with that said, I'll leave you to it. Enjoy the episode. All right, Farhad, Taylor, Tatiana, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hey, Shiv. Thanks for having us.
Great.
All good.
Excited to have all three of you on. Obviously, we worked together for many years, but for the audience, Farhad, why don't we start with you? Let's give an intro of your role, and then we'll move on to Taylor and then Tatiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. So I'm Farhad. I lead the client services team here at To SaaS. And so as you guys might know, at HTS, our jobs are, to help companies, founders, investors understand and unlock the potential of marketing. So really my role and, alongside Taylor and Tatiana here is to make sure that we're providing value to our clients and looking at, doing audits of all the marketing work, looking at budgets, looking at how much investment's going into different areas, and then trying to find opportunities to scale and to find efficiencies. So that's really our bread and butter daily, and privileged to have that work over the last few years here. So
awesome. Taylor?
Yeah, hi. I'm Taylor Moore. I'm VP of Marketing here at To SaaS. On the client side, I'm really helping on the product marketing, messaging, positioning side of things, and content and SEO as well. I've been in the SaaS world for over a decade now, and on both the sales and marketing side of the businesses. So I get to bring that unique perspective to my clients as well.
Awesome. And Tatiana, last but not least.
Yeah, hey, I'm Tatiana. So I'm a director of marketing here at To SaaS. I've spent just under a decade in B2B SaaS marketing, mostly focusing on content marketing and SEO. My role at To SaaS involves working with our clients and our team of experts to uncover the opportunities in their market and build data-driven marketing strategies to just turn marketing into a growth engine for them.
Yeah, and thanks for that, guys. And the reason, obviously, we're having you guys on is the market often hears me speak and talking about the problems we are helping companies solve, but with the client services team, you guys are so close to all of our investors and partners and clients. You're actually helping them solve day-to-day problems, and you have a very different view into their realities and what challenges that they're facing. So let's start with talking about that. Farhad, when you're coming across these companies and you begin a client engagement, what are some of the most common problems that you see clients that are really struggling with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad we're having this conversation, just given the current climate. When we look at the macroeconomic environment and efficiency in general, I think everyone here will agree that the number one thing we see with clients is just this issue of people tracking the investment that they're making and kind of what the actual ROI of that is. And it's getting harder and harder with other compliance issues and internet rules and things like that and cookies and things like that. So it's getting complicated. But I think we're still seeing, a large part of the market like not underinvesting in this area and just not having some of the basics set up right. So, for example, it's just a lot of companies that we work with, are spending a lot of money in a lot of different places that they cannot attribute directly to any tangible outcome, whether that's number of leads or pipeline or opportunities or even actual revenue. So it's sort of shocking the kind of conversations we have with clients. Again, we're seeing this, from anywhere in the smaller range, in the 10 to $20 million sort of range, but also in really, really large enterprise kind of companies as well, right? And I think this is one of the biggest issues that we're seeing.
When you talk about the data side and the tracking side, can you connect the dots for the audience on why is that such a huge problem? Like, what are the marketing decisions or insights that you're looking to get to with that data so that the companies can be better set up to actually scale their marketing efforts?
Yeah. So I think if you look at the number of areas of investment that a modern marketing team needs to do, it's huge, right? We're talking 10 to 20 different areas, specializations, everything from product marketing to advertising to SEO to the website to messaging, events. There are just so many broad categories of investment. And what we're trying to get to is, how do people make decisions? How do CMOs, boards, investors try to make decisions on where to invest, right? That's the big problem. Over time, budgets get bloated, investments keep continuing in different areas, and we're not taking a pause to understand how all of that attribution is actually happening, and are we actually investing in the right place? So what we want to try to get to is understand literally by every single channel that we're investing in, down to the campaign, down to the event, down to the specifics, how much we're investing in any given time period and what we actually got out of it, right? And whether that's tangible things like leads and pipeline and revenue, or other sort of leading indicators such as sort of eyeballs and impressions and other things, right? So that's what we're trying to get to is, okay, we've invested all this money, but so what? And what that'll allow us to do once we sort of do that audit is then to understand, okay, where do we actually need to allocate the actual budget, right? Are we actually allocating in the right space? Because 9 times out of 10, when we're brought in, there are massive imbalances in where that investment needs to go. Sometimes companies are over-indexing in certain areas that are just not driving any leads or revenue pretty tangibly. And in some places, there are investments that need to be scaled up because those things are working. And so it's just an exercise in understanding how to find the right balance of investment in a marketing team.
And Tatiana, maybe shifting to you, when you look at this same conversation happening with CEOs and boards, how does that lack of visibility, what are the challenges that that's presenting to those individuals as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, the first challenge really is just that they don't have visibility into what marketing is doing, what's working for the company, why marketing is making the decisions that they're making, which then often creates a lack of trust between the CEO and the CMO or the board and the marketing team, because again, they just really don't know why they're making those decisions that they're making. So I think that, once we've done that audit and have identified, okay, here are the channels that are working for you, that are doing what they're supposed to, the next step is really to put together dashboards, make sure that we have better visibility on that spend so that we're able to trace up how it's aligned to broader business goals and start building that trust between what the marketing team is doing and the CEO, because the marketing team can directly point to the impact that they're having on those broader business goals.
Aren't some of these things, and this is a common question that I get asked too, but I'm curious what you guys think, and Taylor, maybe you can take a shot at this, is aren't some of these things kind of harder to track when we're talking about product marketing or content marketing and some of the more softer marketing activities? So how do we address that for the boards and the CEOs that are looking for that visibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, number one, I'd say prioritizing the things that are easier to track and making sure that that is at least your baseline. So just to kind of put a finer point on what Farhad was talking about earlier is, a lot of times we'll see our clients really just kind of focusing on tracking within channel or reporting within channel. So seeing that, paid media and how it's working within the Google Ads platform, but they're not seeing that all the way through opportunity and close one, and understanding maybe there are certain channels that are converting better than others into pipeline. So I'd say, like, first and foremost, making sure that those channels that are trackable are in a good place. I'd say also too, there's going to be like this forever debate within marketing of brand and tracking brand. And there's, of course, things that you can do around like big brand studies of recognition and awareness in the market that are very expensive. There's some brand work that's just the cost of doing business, right? And I know CEOs don't often like to hear that, or CMOs are constantly trying to tie that to a specific ROI. But there are some brand initiatives that are just, this is what we need to do to play in the space, and building in some of that buffer of having certain things that are not going to be able to be directly tied to ROI. But if the majority of your marketing spend that you have on paid media is directly trackable, I think that building in that 20-30% buffer is an okay thing to do, depending on the space that you're playing in, right? If you're in a very competitive space, where you have like multiple competitors you're going head to head with, brand is going to need to be a focus, and you're going to need to invest in some of those larger thought leadership brand plays that can't always be directly tied to ROI, and that's okay.
And I think, and I think there's other, like, these are such foundational things, right? Like building up your brand, getting your messaging and positioning, your product marketing all in a good space, right? That is like the foundation that everything else is built on. So for me, investing in that will provide dividends across all programs, across all conversion rates, will attract more people and convert them faster and a better rate. So for me, it's like, that's how you track it. I think there are core metrics that over time, and maybe it's not a week to week metric, but it's a quarter to quarter metric when we're looking at overall conversion rates and overall sort of interest in your brand. That some of those things can be. So there are ways to look at it.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to track brand over time, right? Share of voice, mentions, like that's all trackable. The tying it to ROI is forever going to be a difficult piece. And yeah, to Farhad's point, like getting that as the foundational layer for how we build a go-to-market is really important. We're working with a client right now who's really unsure of their messaging, and they want it battle tested and to make sure, like, is this truly how we should be going to market? And it's going to impact what we say on paid media, what we say in content, the type of content that we build. So making sure that is in a good spot by vetting, messaging and positioning with, doing customer analysis and understanding like insights there, win-loss analysis, understanding when things were won and lost based on the services and positioning there, and then doing like a competitor messaging and positioning exercise as well. So that's really the foundation.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more. Taylor, how much are you seeing the success of a client's marketing strategy or implementation depend on the product marketing work, or they just don't have enough maturity, or they haven't set up the right assets to set up the rest of the marketing work that actually needs to drive pipeline and revenue?
Yeah, I'd say, it's going to be a balance between spending and overinvesting so many resources to get that messaging 100% perfect versus taking all the insights that, like I've just mentioned, competitor, customer, your internal customer facing teams, taking that and just battle testing it, put it in sales decks, put it on the website. Like, let's get some of that messaging tested and iterate from there. But I would say it is an extremely foundational part that's going to inform all of the other parts of your go-to-market. We've seen many cases where clients have missed the mark, and they're kind of changing positioning on the fly in order to update their go-to-market in a more productive way. So I'd say it's very, very important. But I think sometimes we'll see clients overinvest the time to try to get it like that 100% versus taking something that's 80-90% of the way there and getting like in-field feedback.
Just add to that is also like there is, and we talk a lot about this, your content talks a lot about this, kind of an order of operations in marketing in which we really want to get some of that foundational stuff down. And also that idea of hot, warm, cold, which your content talks a lot about, but for those listeners who might not be as familiar with it, it's this idea that we want to create content or assets that are serving the people who are already in market first. So appealing to those people, they're already convinced that they need a solution. They just need to be convinced that your solution is the right one. So creating that kind of content, before moving on to those colder types of content, which are like, okay, like what is XYZ, or like just trying to convince people that they need a solution at all. And so really like making sure that we have that foundational layer in place and working from, hot, warm, cold is super important, just to see that, because if we don't have that hot content in place, then why are we skipping right away to trying to appeal to a completely cold audience, when they're not going to be as ready to buy? So I think that idea also ties into the idea of making sure we have our messaging and positioning nailed down for those people who are already in market and who are already interested.
Right. Farhad, can you talk about this piece and expand on what Tatiana just shared? As much as getting the data in order is important, as much as getting product marketing is important, a lot of the companies that we encounter just don't have the fundamentals in place. And you can always over-index in some of these areas where you go on an extensive product marketing exercise or take on an infrastructure project to make sure revenue ops is completely in order. And meanwhile, you're missing revenue targets and projections. So just talk about that order of operations a little bit more.
Yeah, in terms of order of operations, I think this is where, as you said, a lot of people struggle and don't get it right. So I think for me, when I think of order of operations, there is the fundamental and foundational piece, right? Which is what Taylor sort of alluded to, which is, okay, let's understand who we're going after, what their pain points are, who we are, and how we're going to solve them, right? This is very simple. This can be a 2-page document that just outlines that. The next step for me is always we need to get that to market, right? So the obvious place is your website. It'll be surprising how many people's websites don't actually reflect that internal kind of communication and internal work that's been done. Like you go to a website, it won't even tell you what the product does sometimes or what category they play in, right? Simple things like that. So making sure so that's sort of your storefront, right? To get your web assets and your customer facing assets up to date, right? So there's that core sort of content work that needs to be done. From there, I mean, it's your standard marketing funnel. The idea is now, how do we drive traffic and relevant people to those assets, right? So it's sort of the fundamentals, getting the word out in terms of your content, and then how do we actually drive traffic and people, right? And that can be through outbound motions or getting people in front of the right ICP that way. That can be sort of generating advertising campaigns or SEO or other ways to sort of bring people inbound. And that'll just depend on sort of on your company's unit economics and business model. But that's how I think about it. Sort of 3 big pillars of getting the foundations right, getting that up to date, and then start driving people.
Tatiana, how often are you seeing when we're coming into companies where, because they're not doing things in the right order, or they just have the wrong priorities, and there's like almost like a reset that needs to happen to refocus them to say, okay, your product marketing is good enough, or your data infrastructure is good enough. Here are the other things we need to focus on. Like, do you find that just teams are working on the wrong things and that's affecting their ability to get more resources?
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's actually something we encounter quite frequently, where it might, like, I think part of the reason for that is because teams will focus on the activities in which they're experts, but if we haven't set up the right team, we might not be able to capture the opportunities that exist in that market because we don't have the people who are able to give the depth to those activities that they need. So for example, we recently conducted a due diligence engagement where we're looking at a company's marketing opportunity before acquisition. And we found that there was a big opportunity for them in SEO, in Google Ads. They, aren't really appearing for searches in either way that are really fundamental to the software that they're selling. But a big part of that reason was because there was no one on the team who was capable of owning those activities. So part of our recommendation there was that the team really did need to hire specialists who could own and scale those areas of growth, because just having the resources on your team who are capable of owning the areas of your marketing that are really important for the company is also something that is super important, and where we often will see a gap.
I just wanted to add to Tatiana's point. I think it's such a good point on, we'll often see our clients kind of, their go-to-market falls into what the current level of expertise on the team is, right? So we were working with a client who had kind of grown their marketing team under the leadership of this like brand generalist, like very strong on the brand side, big on social, big on podcasts, big on content, but didn't have that like demand gen mindset, wasn't overly metrics focused, wasn't overly like, everything was very like touchy feely as opposed to driving pipeline. So they had built an amazing brand, but they weren't really generating predictable pipeline through predictable channels. So what they ended up doing as we were working with them is hiring someone to lead that demand gen side. So the marketing leader kind of took over just the side of the marketing team that was more brand content focused, hired a separate demand gen manager, demand gen director actually, to be more metrics minded, pipeline minded. And that worked really well for them. So yeah, it's you can see these marketing teams kind of growing up just restricted by the current talent that they have. So what we really try to do when we work with clients is, what's the ideal go-to-market, and then how do we staff that up accordingly?
Yeah. Taylor, talk about the resourcing side, because sometimes a lot of the strategy work that you're saying on the people side is not aligned, and even they don't have enough headcount, or they have too much headcount, or the wrong people in the wrong seats, or the right people in the wrong seats. Like, how much of the success of this is dependent on the people side?
Yeah, so when we're working with our clients, that's often like our team recommendations is often one of the last things that we assess, because we want to look at it objectively of, if no one was at your team, what is the ideal go-to-market, right? Is it heavy content? Is it heavy partnerships? And then the last recommendation we make is around team and budget. What are the actual resources that are required to get this work done? And sometimes that works really nicely with the existing team that they have. And sometimes that's actually a complete overhaul, and either the existing team needs to be reallocated, or we need to do a little bit more of a fresh start of hiring people that are, expert partnership marketing or customer marketing, because that's now going to be 50% of your strategy. So that is a thing that we always try to kind of do and focus on last, with that objective lens of, here's your ideal go-to-market, not your go-to-market based on your existing talent. So
Yeah, and Farhad, I guess you're the one that's kind of working with these clients and interfacing with the executives and the private equity investors often, and they often look at the team as one of the biggest levers. Like, private equity investors just know that leadership changes everything. So talk about that side of the awareness at the CEO level about the team and resourcing and having the right CMO in place, and how we're addressing that and some of the issues and problems that you see there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to answer your previous question, like for me, like team is the biggest lever, right? Like all of these activities are people based. These are all sort of intellectual activities that need the right thinking and the right people. So yes, I think typically when we're brought in, it's like someone at the organization has some kind of inkling that something's not quite right here, right? Like people are missing targets, we're not getting lead volume, we're not converting leads, there's something going on. And that often can be traced back to decisions made by marketing leadership, right? So I think unfortunately what we see more often than we would like to see is marketing leaders really focusing on the wrong things. I think some of the mistakes that are happening are, as I mentioned before, allocating resources to some of the wrong things, not taking a zoom out view and like looking at the general landscape and understanding where investment needs to be made. I think another issue is sort of communication and again, tracking and metrics. Marketers are not often communicating their work and their efficacy up the chain, so that the CEOs and boards need to understand how the investment's being made and what changes are being made and how they can be adjusting. I think CMOs too often, and marketing teams in general, are not thinking as sort of business owners and business leaders to understand, hey, we are custodians of large amounts of money and large amounts of investment that these teams are making. And there's almost like an onus and a responsibility to sort of invest that wisely and to be able to prove ROI and do that. So I think there's a number of issues like that which create problems and tensions in marketing teams where there's just sort of a blank check approach and people are not tracking how things are going. So I think, investors understand that really well, especially coming into a new business that they've just acquired or revisiting a company in their portfolio that's struggling. It's the first place to look, right? Especially if there's a significant marketing investment. And that's what they're going to find most often than not, that these are some of the issues at their companies.
Tatiana, do you have like an example from a client where the team was almost like the throttle or the ceiling on the company's ability to capture opportunities that were clearly available to the company to scale revenue and pipeline?
Yeah, I think that one of the companies that we worked with recently, an example that comes to mind is just that they were really focusing heavily on a strategy for SEO that just like wasn't really working. But the internal team was really bullish on this strategy and was really pushing for it to really be the driver of what they were doing for SEO. So I think because we were able to come in and provide that unbiased perspective and really point to other data points where we were like, look, like this is what we're seeing at other organizations. This is what we're seeing based on external market research. We really do need to shift strategy here. And because this was just a major driver of leads for them, that was something that was super important. So helping them, see that the way that the current team was running this program was not aligned with how the market and how SEO is changing and how it's changing with AI and all of that. Helping them see that was a really important part of our engagement with them.
Yeah, and Farhad, like I guess we run into this problem with a lot of clients where they don't even have necessarily the right marketing leader to help lead the organization. Sometimes there's a mismatch where you have maybe a product marketing heavy leader, but the company needs a demand gen leader, or maybe they're more inbound driven, but they need more ABM. And that ends up being a throttle on the business as well. So talk about that mismatch and how do you go about navigating that as a CEO or as an investor to get the right leader for your business?
Yeah, I think that's a very common issue where you have sort of legacy marketers that have sort of made their way up or hired in, that, as you said, sort of have a focus in one area and have weaknesses in others. So obviously, that has issues in terms of you really need to be at one point a CMO needs to have been a practitioner in a lot of different areas to really understand deeply the areas in marketing. And I think that's where we're lucky we have our team here that have that and we can bring that together. But often CMOs don't have that, right? And especially CMOs that have a long tenure and have experience, it's almost like the experience is good, but they've also sort of grown up and brought up in 20 years ago when marketing was very different, right? And things have changed. So if they're not keeping up with the changes, that's part of the problem. So I think the way I would advise and how I advise investors and CEOs to look at it is, I think the CMO's job is sort of like that, kind of how I describe like a custodian of investment. Like I think a really important position that the CMO needs to play is that role of like understanding super metrics minded, super finance minded, super investment minded to understand how things play, and obviously having a fundamental of all areas of marketing. And I think if you have that linchpin as sort of the center of the marketing team, that goes a long way. And then it's important to surround that CMO with really, really strong subject matter experts and leaders in different areas, right? So I think if you have that sort of custodian related sort of finance minded CMO, and around them build a really strong team where they can rely on someone to do the investment in the paid media side, to make sure the product marketing is up to date, to make sure the website and having the marketing operations is there. So I think it's really building a team around a really smart business-minded person and getting subject matter experts, deep marketing experts around them. So that's how we like to advise our clients to build the team. What that allows is for scale. It allows for accountability in all those areas, and really allows subject matter experts to lead their own areas and find some growth. So that's usually our advice.
That's great. I want to shift gears a little bit to the value creation side. And Taylor, why don't we start with you? When we're coming in, let's assume the team is in a good place. There is a good CMO. There's decent resourcing or supporting roles around them. Talk about the strategy piece a bit. Where are some of the biggest opportunities for these clients when they think about driving enterprise value or pipeline and revenue? And how should they think about deploying their limited resources? And then I'd like to actually go around the table. Tatiana, we'll get your take and Farhad as well.
Yeah, so I'd say one of the interesting or not often thought of opportunities is really around like expansion or tapping into your existing customer base, right? Like there's always a very big focus in on new logo, but what can be done with kind of like your friendlies or your existing customer base, right? So one thing that we'll often do is help our clients map out that white space and understand like, is there opportunity to grow either within the existing base or get referred into new logo through your existing base? So that often is a part of our engagements where we're helping them map that and then creating strategies for that. So for example, like one of our clients had like Deloitte Spain, I believe, as one of their existing customers. So mapping out a strategy of how do you get introduced into Deloitte Canada by your Deloitte Spain customer, and what does that entire campaign look like in terms of leveraging that Deloitte Spain contact and case study and business case in order to expand within your existing customer base instead of just always focused on new logos. So I'd say that's a really interesting way to generate more value and more pipeline without always trying to expand into new logo.
Tatiana, what do you think about that? Like, how often are you seeing the cross-sell and upsell opportunity be almost as important, or if not more important, than landing that new logos?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're seeing quite often on platform companies or companies where they're selling multiple modules, especially because we're often seeing that the close rates for those deals are higher than net new sales. Exactly as Taylor said, like if people already know you and trust you and have had a good experience with you, then it just makes sense to find additional opportunities there. I think especially as more and more companies are focusing really tightly on account-based marketing, big buzzword there, really getting their targeting down on the outbound side. I think they really do need to focus on doing that same kind of work within their customer base as well. And I think that ties into the bigger point of there's often opportunities to diversify the marketing mix that companies are doing in general, especially if, the earlier example that Taylor mentioned where a company had grown really well through that brand building and through less traditional channels, examples like that where we're seeing that historically their growth has come really strongly from one place, just seeing like what other channels they can begin to diversify into and make sure that they're really making the most of where their buyers are today across a broader range of areas.
Yeah. And Farhad, on your side, like when we're coming into these companies and you're looking at all these different value creation levers, like are companies like almost overlooking what's in the investment thesis, or at least marketers are like too focused on landing new clients and not understanding what the investors really care about or what's in that investment thesis?
Yeah, for sure. I think marketers often have, just a very narrow lens in terms of what they're trying to achieve. I think it's not in it's not happening enough where marketers are zooming out and understanding, okay, what are all the opportunities across the whole business? Because in the end, yeah, as you said, right, what is the investment thesis, right? We're trying to hit revenue goals, we're trying to hit efficiency metrics, we're trying to hit EBITDA numbers, and I know you've written a lot about this, like where can marketing fit in, whether that's expansion, whether that's retention, whether that's new logo. There's so many areas where marketing and content can play a role. And so, our job is often to sort of uncover some of that, to look at the landscape in general. And of course, it's like natural for CROs and CMOs to sort of jump into like, we just want more leads, more leads, more leads. And of course, they're always going to play a big part. But yeah, we urge our clients to sort of look at their internal data, find other opportunities that's already sitting there that are warmer, have better conversion rates, that have better, and often those upsell and cross sell sort of opportunities are really handled by sales, and it's like sales led motions, and because they own the relationships and maybe sometimes customer success managers, etc. But we are really big proponents of getting those teams to talk to marketing and marketing to start leading campaigns, as they're the ones who really understand the prospect and how to how to communicate that properly. So yeah, our goal is to get those teams to talk and start moving forward.
Taylor, is there like a transparency issue where maybe the marketers are almost unaware of the investment thesis or what boards care about and CEOs care about? And often when we're coming in, like we get exposed to that because that's the person that we're really working with or the person that's hiring us. And so we hear about the whole thing. We see the management presentations. We have access to data rooms and the SIM and all of that, where maybe the marketers don't see the EBITDA projections or don't see what's the underlying investment thesis. So do you think there's like an information gap there?
Yeah, there's probably an information gap. I mean, we've seen it done well at a few of our clients, but I would say more times than not, there's an information gap, and it has to do with like marketing's thought on how responsible they are for revenue, right? I think that's a breakdown of a lot of clients of ours think that they're responsible first and foremost for leads as opposed to end revenue generated for the company. And if that's the culture within, it's like maybe that's why they're not seeing behind the curtain of what this investment thesis is, or what the board is expecting. It's because there's no culture of expectation that marketing should be responsible for this.
I think that there's like an element of transparency that needs to come from the top so that everyone on the team does know what's going on and does have the ability to feel responsible because they feel like there is that transparency. And I think that goes for not only, again, from top down, but also like within teams. I think another challenge that we're often faced with which Farhad alluded to, is that there's not a lot of transparency between marketing and sales, or a lot of alignment. Again, sometimes in these ABM plays, the sales team is really bullish on one direction, and then the marketing team is doing something completely different. And then the sales team comes back and is like, well, why aren't you helping us drive leads in this vertical? And marketing is like, well, we're working on this campaign. And that can just lead to some clashes and some lack of success there. So really just making sure that, again, from the top down, but also from these internal teams, making sure everyone is really aligned on what that value proposition is one of the most important things that I think we can help with as well.
Yeah, and Farhad, shift talking about the investment thesis and what boards care about. Talk about the diligence side. Like when we're coming into these engagements, working with just a PE investor as they're signing an LOI or coming into a new transaction. What is some of the work that's happening there, and what are some of the challenges that we're uncovering and opportunities that we're able to help these firms navigate so that they can kind of create more enterprise value as they close on the deal?
Yeah. We do a number of these every year, right? This is sort of where PE investors have found a target. They've signed an LOI. They're building up their thesis to understand, hey, what is the thesis here to invest in this business? What is the long-term plan? They're often in between sort of investment committee meetings and decisions that are made, and then we're brought in, right? So our job is to help investment committees and PE firms understand what they're actually getting into. So, a lot of marketing teams have skeletons in their closet. They have, other things that are going on historically. And our job is to, how quickly can we sort of uncover, what's been going on at those businesses? So number one is we sort of do an audit, right? We just try to understand where all the investments been made in the last 2 years, and sort of list that out and sort of understand what the ROI of all of that investment has been. So that's where we sort of start. We have X amount of dollars in, and we have X amount of dollars out in terms of pipeline or revenue. So, and then we can benchmark that against other companies to understand kind of where their efficiency is as a marketing engine. So I find our clients find that very helpful. They can kind of compare that to other companies in their portfolio, compare that to the market in general. That's where we start. From there, we'll start looking at opportunities. So based on that, we can break that down by channel to understand, hey, these are the channels that seem to be working well. So let's figure out ways to scale those. These are the channels that seem to be struggling based on that metric. What do we think, right? Are there ways to optimize those? Do we think we need to reallocate? Are there net new channels that we're not investing in? So that's sort of the program-related version of that. Like, okay, where are we actually investing? So what that allows now is a PE firm to, even before they jump in and actually write their check, to understand how much wiggle room there is, how much opportunity there is to actually optimize and improve things at the business. And I think that's super valuable, right? I think we've seen our clients, our PE clients, literally copy paste some parts of our deck and put them straight into their IC decks, and that really helps their investment committee to understand sort of what's going on, right? And then we go all the way, right? So not just the program level, but then we'll look at the team and we'll look at other the technology side of things and try to give them an understanding of where all those things sit. So by the end of a diligence engagement, a PE firm really has a really solid understanding of what the opportunities are at a company, whether that's and have an understanding of where there might be cost savings and takeouts and where they might want to invest more in. So I think going through that engagement with us, our PE firm partners often feel much better about the engagement and feel better about the investment, and sort of can confirm a few of their hunches along the way.
How much inefficiency are we finding inside these engagements on average? And Taylor, maybe you can take this, and Farhad, you can jump in as well. Is when we're meeting these companies, we see their full data and we run this audit in their existing spend. Like, is there 30% inefficiency, 50%? Like, how much more room is there to optimize existing spend?
Part of that answer lies in the lack of information that is provided, right? So sometimes we'll find that like that reporting is just not tight, and therefore like that's your answer, right? If we're not able to see pipeline through to closed won, that's the first thing, is like there's so much opportunity to increase efficiency if we can just get that data and understand which campaigns are producing and not producing, right? So I think that's one thing we see with a lot of clients, is that they're not even measuring or tracking these things, and therefore they're probably wasting a lot of spend. We don't know what spend they're wasting at because they don't have the reporting in place, but we can make an educated guess that there's likely a lot of spend that's being wasted because they're just not tracking those. So part of that answer lies in like the lack of information that's sent over with some of these diligence deals. But Farhad, you can maybe speak a little bit more to kind of what we're seeing on average.
Yeah, I think on average, I think Shiv, your sort of range is within my range as well. I mean, I think 20 to 40% sort of wastage or misaligned spend is very common for us to see, unfortunately. And I think we're pretty quickly able to identify where that's going and why that's happening. And luckily, often there are opportunities to sort of reinvest that. It's not necessarily that we just want to take that cash out and starve the business, but it's like, where else can we be spending that money, right? And I think it's actually, if I may be so bold, like egregious, some of the spend that happens and some of the issues that we see and some of the mismanagement of spend. Often we're seeing, I think the two big areas that we often look into deeply is on program spend on paid media. It's just a huge overinvestment sometimes in certain channels like LinkedIn or YouTube or even podcast ads, things like that. We just wrapped up an engagement with a large company, $100 million company that had just signed a contract for $200K a month on podcast ads, right? Even though they had a lot of other fundamental advertising on Google and LinkedIn not figured out. So that was an opportunity that we quickly were able to fix. The other big investment is often on the team side of things, right? So we've had a couple of engagements in the last year, $200 million plus engagements, right, where the teams are just so over bloated. 100 plus marketing teams for a $200 million company, and in both those cases, we've helped the companies bring those teams down to closer to like sort of 50 to 70 kind of person team, and they haven't skipped a beat, moving forward. So, there are a couple of areas that we know where we need to look into immediately, and it just helps to get a fresh eyes on it. Luckily, us at HTS, we've worked on like over 100 PE-backed portfolio companies at this point, so we just got so much institutional knowledge and just been able to like pinpoint a lot of sort of benchmarks and understand how the market in general should be acting, and so I think that helps.
Tatiana, I want to just shift gears as we're kind of coming on to the close of this episode. Just one main topic that is a hot button issue across private equity firms and companies is just AI in general. And as we're diligencing clients or in full engagements with clients, one of the types of problems that we've seen is the impact of AI on traffic and lead volume and opportunities and pipeline in general. Talk about that piece and what companies need to be thinking about and what investors need to be thinking about from a marketing perspective, just to help these companies navigate a world where AI is just such a dominant force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think coming back to something that Farhad said earlier, I think that the team is still going to be something that's super important, even in the era of AI. So again, like what you put into AI, the initial input is super important to get a good output. So if we don't have people who can think at that strategic level about what they're putting in, it'll just be garbage in, garbage out. So I think that's the first thing I'd want to say is that I think in this era of AI, the human element of the strategy and of the thinking behind things is going to become something that's more important than ever, even as we're looking at ways that it can be used to streamline some of those more basic day-to-day tasks that we're doing. I think another thing I'd add to that is just on, I think another area that's really changing quickly is on the SEO side. We're looking at, AEO, GEO, all these new acronyms now, and trying to figure out, okay, if this was a super important channel for us historically, how is that shifting in this area now, and how do we optimize for that new world? And I think that, again, that's another area where some of those tools that are coming out are going to be really important, because we're going to need to be looking at tracking that a little bit differently, as well as optimizing our content a little bit differently. So again, if that's been a channel that's been super important historically, how are we thinking about that in a different way going forward?
Taylor, on your side, as you're looking at product marketing and comms work and sales enablement, are there places where companies can find more productivity, and how do they implement some of that faster with AI tools and platforms that are available to them?
Yeah, I'd say I just want to jump off of Tatiana's point around like website traffic quickly before productivity. We're still seeing, so if you think of, searching for something in ChatGPT and getting response within feed, we're entering into a more clickless world, right? We're not necessarily going into a website to get that information. We're seeing it within the feed of Claude or ChatGPT or whatever you're using. What we are seeing is that mostly that's impacting top of funnel volume, but that our clients are still seeing bottom of funnel volume for their kind of category keywords still going to their websites. So there's a little bit of differentiation there in terms of like, if top of funnel converts really well for you and that's the way that you're getting people down the funnel, that's something to really pay attention to. If it's mostly your bottom of funnel that's converting well, less of a worry in terms of optimizing there. Of course, you do want to do it over time, but less urgent. In terms of productivity, like Tatiana said, I think that we're seeing now people really adopting AI aggressively and becoming these like master prompts and really understanding what it takes to get good responses and good outputs. So I'd say look for people like that to join your team, right? You want someone that knows how to use the tools, that is interested in it, because this is all changing so quickly. You want someone that's staying abreast of all of these new tools, how the LLMs are changing. That person is going to be able to not just be an asset in marketing, but probably help enable your sales team, help enable your product team. And you're going to find a lot of productivity with that one or two people that are kind of like the AI evangelists on your team.
Yeah. And on that, I guess, Farhad, everybody wants to talk about AI because it is the main topic. But at the same time, we meet these companies where they don't have the basics in place, and they're looking for these optimizations on the AI side when they don't have a basic website, they don't have basic campaigns running. So talk about that balance and educating these companies on how much focus should be going towards AI versus the fundamental things that are necessary to actually build a good go-to-market organization.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? It's sort of the fundamentals of marketing and building a brand will always stay the same, right? And I think that's important. I think AI perhaps changes the way people find you, or the way people are talking about you, or the way people perceive you. But the fundamentals will always stay the same, right? So I think when we go into businesses, and yes, it's obviously a big buzz and hype, and there's a lot of people who are interested in it. But yes, there's again an order of operations, a fundamental that needs to be there. And in fact, there's a lot of studies now that show that to be on top of the AI rankings and to be shown more in some of these LLMs, it is the companies that have strong brand, it is the companies that have strong reputations that are winning there, right? So those fundamentals will always be. So the fundamentals of understanding who your customer is, messaging properly, understanding their pain points, putting that out to the market, having the right programs, having the right budget, having the right the right copy and right programs that go to market. Those fundamentals need to still be done first. And I think when we think of AI, I kind of, you kind of alluded to this, just split it up into two simple areas. One is, okay, on the go-to-market side, like whether that's SEO and traffic, how AI is affecting us. And then B, yes, on the efficiency side and within teams, I think there should be an expectation to find 15-20% efficiency by using some of these tools, especially on the content side and things like that. So start there, keep it simple, right? And I think, not to run before we can walk when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway to kind of close off the episode. And before we do, just any final thoughts for investors or CEOs as they're thinking about transforming their teams or scaling their marketing efforts? And Tatiana, we'll start with you, then Taylor, then Farhad.
Yeah, I think it's to not be afraid to pilot things and just like put stuff out in market and see how it is picked up, right? So we have one client that like SEO was their whole marketing strategy. Obviously, there's been a shift with organic traffic, with AI. There's a big competitor that came into their space, kind of knocked them out. So organic became really challenging for them. They hadn't tried really much else, right? They'd really over-indexed on this one strategy. So don't be afraid to pilot something, get something out quick and dirty, a little ABM strategy, test out a podcast, test out a webinar series. Like this doesn't all need to be perfect until you get it into market. Let's just kind of iterate, get your MVP out there and get some quick learnings instead of making sure everything's perfect on the back end before it's launched.
Yeah. Farhad, you want to have the closing thoughts here?
Yeah, I think if you're a PE investor and you have companies in your portfolio that are a little bit of a laggard, missing targets, struggling to find scale, we are 100% convinced that there is a solution for that, and it is marketing, right? And I think I will urge all investors to spend a little time going a little bit deeper, and that's super important, just to go deeper and to understand where the investment's being made within these marketing organizations. There is inefficiency to be found, and unfortunately, I think that's where we've had some success. Is we've got a framework to help understand that inefficiency, to help understand how to scale. But my advice to investors is to not perhaps automatically jump to solutions, whether that's getting a new CMO or making changes, or it's a product issue, it's a sales issue, but really coming down to the fundamentals of marketing, like how are we going to market, who are we going to market with, how are we telling our story. So I just think if you have an investment that you would be hoping is going better, I think it's well worth taking the time to dig into those things. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's a great thought to end the episode. And yeah, that's something that I've been trying to evangelize for the longest time, is that oftentimes your revenue problem is a marketing problem. And I'm glad that we had the three of you to shed light into that and how we're actually helping our clients and bringing some real life case studies. So Tatiana, Taylor, Farhad, thanks a lot for doing this and appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Shiv.
Thank you, Shiv. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you take off, just a few requests from our side. Number one, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you go to listen to your podcasts. Number two, if you are in the market for due diligence services, strategy consulting, or fractional CMO services, please get in touch with us at www.howtosaas.com. And third, please buy a copy of my new book, Exit Ready Marketing. It covers a ton of concepts that we take our customers through, private equity investors, B2B companies, CEOs, operating partners, and marketers. And there's a ton of great value in there that expands on my previous book, Post-Acquisition Marketing, as well. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed today's content, and we'll see you on the next episode.